more viewers as the meeting goes on, but we are all set from the technical end.
All right. Alex, from your rough following, are we at a point where we have enough to have a quorum that we can start going?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the GENESEE Transportation Council quarterly board meeting. Alex, if you can advance the slide, please. Just a few sort of housekeeping items. This meeting is being conducted remotely in compliance with the governor's executive order that waived some provisions of the open meetings law. But in order to comply with those requirements, we are recording, as Jody mentioned, and it is being shared through our publicinput.com platform that allow anybody from the general public to watch the meeting, hear what's going on, and join us when at the appropriate times within the agenda. Folks that are joining us from the public do have multiple ways of providing input. They can text, they can chat, they can call, they can email. So we try to reduce the barriers to make that happen. And for the folks on the line, if they want to leave a recorded comment, they could hit *2. If they want to be able to join the conversation, hit *3, and at the appropriate time, we can let them in. If you can advance, Alex, please. So as I mentioned, with the video being, with the meeting being made available for the public to view, the open meetings law also requires us to record it and archive it so it's available for viewing later on, and that will be posted to our website. Trying to think of any more opening remarks here. Can you advance the slide, Alex? Okay, with that, we'll post the agenda, and Mr. Lefebvre, we are ready to formally call to order.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Alex, if you would, please conduct roll.
Sure. Genesee County, Ms. Stein.
Present. Sorry.
Livingston County, Mr. Lefebvre.
Here.
Mineral County Legislature, Dr. Carbone. Ontario County, Mr. Marin.
Inglesby, alternate.
Thank you, John. Orleans County, Ms. Johnson.
John Pepinelli representing.
Thanks, John. Seneca County, Mr. Hasten.
Mitch Rowe representing.
Wayne County, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I'm here now. I can hear you guys. I had a switch set wrong. I'm not sure. I think we have one.
Great. Great. Good to hear you. Wyoming County, Ms. Ryan.
Jerry Davis representing.
Thank you, Jerry. Yates County, Mr. Pat.
Present.
Monroe County Executive, Mr. Bello. Monroe County Planning Board, Mr. Santos.
Good morning. Present.
Monroe County Supervisors Association, Mr. Dienta. Monroe County at large, Mr. Hogan.
Here.
Monroe County at large, Mr. McCann.
Scott Leathers is representing.
City of Rochester Mayor, Ms. Warren.
I think Norm Jones was having some connection issues. I saw it disconnected, so I imagine he'll be joining us back again.
Okay. Rochester City Council, President Scott.
Antonisa Brown here for President Scott.
Thank you. Rochester City Planning Commission, Mr. Watson.
Kevin Kelly representing.
Thanks, Kevin. City of Rochester at large, Mr. McIntosh.
Here.
Present.
Empire State Development Corporation, Mr. Gertler.
Steve Golding representing.
New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Mr. Sagos.
Tim Walsh representing.
New York State Department of Transportation, Mr. Dominguez.
Chris Reedy representing.
New York State Thruway Authority, Mr. Driscoll. Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council, Mr. Cutler. Rochester Genesee Regional Transportation Authority, Mr. Jeffries.
Bill Carpenter representing.
Thanks, Bill. Federal Aviation Administration, Ms. Martinez. Federal Highway Administration, Mr. Marquis. Federal Transit Administration, Mr. Goodman. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have quorum.
Thank you, Alex. At this time, I'll ask if there's any members of the public that would like to address the board.
Not at this time. I'm not seeing anybody. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next, we'll consider the meeting minutes from our last quarterly meeting, February 25th. I'd ask if there's a motion and a second for that.
Santos moves the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any corrections that anyone would like to bring forward on that set of minutes? Hearing none, it kind of worked good the last couple meetings. We'll just, I'll just say, is there anyone opposed to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll consider the meeting minutes approved. We do have in the packet, there is
Mr. we confirm the sound.
for informational purposes, the minutes from the, yeah. Yes.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if we could confirm the second for the minutes, these minutes.
Dan
Oh,
Hogan.
yeah.
Oh, thank you, Dan.
You're okay with the minutes? You got a motion and a second?
Yep, that was clear. Thank you.
Okay, and then there were no corrections, and then I'll ask again, is anybody opposed to the minutes? Okay, thanks. The minutes stand approved. Also in your packet, there is, for informational purposes, there's the minutes from the April 8th Planning Committee meeting and the draft minutes from the May 13th Planning Committee meeting. I'll ask Mr. Stack to please provide us with the communications and announcements, please.
Jim, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So you didn't hear me just ask if you're not actively talking, please mute your line. We have a lot of, it seems like there's some interference where things are cutting out. So that's why I was muted. I'm sure you've already heard Kevin Bush is retired as the NISDOT Region 4 Director. His last day in the office was actually yesterday, but we still would like to recognize his past efforts and contributions to GTC. So like we've done many times before, I've prepared a certificate of appreciation for Kevin that reads, in recognition of his dedication and commitment to ensuring that the transportation decision-making in the Genesee Finger Lakes region was accomplished in a collaborative, transparent, and proficient manner, the Genesee Transportation Council hereby expresses its deepest gratitude and appreciation to Kevin Bush. Chris Reeve has graciously agreed to help us get a framed copy over to Kevin since we're not able to present it in person. That's my announcements.
Thank you. Now we'll move into reports and action on old business. I'd like to ask Scott Leatherstitch to please give a report as the Planning Committee Chairman.
Good morning. Thank you. The Planning Committee met on April 8th and May 13th and recommends that the GTC board accept reports as evidence of completion of 8 Unified Planning Work Program tasks. They are the Wayne County High Accident Locations Program, the Livingston County Downtown Wayfinding Master Plan, the Route 390 Multi-Use Trail Restoration and Safety Improvement Study, the Mount Morris-Leicester Route 36 Corridor Study, your O'Rourke Bridge Operations and Maintenance Analysis and Strategy, the Gananda Parkway Pedestrian and Bicycle Active Transportation Plan, the Middle Cheshire Road and Healthcare Services Corridor Active Transportation Plan, and the Lake Ontario State Parkway Transportation Alternative Feasibility Study. We also recommend amending the fiscal year 2021-2022 Unified Planning Work Program to reflect the contribution of federal fiscal year 2020-2021 rollover amounts. Also amend the federal fiscal year 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program as requested by the City of Rochester, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Orleans, Wayne, and Wyoming counties, RGRTA, and the New York State Department of Transportation. Also recommend adopting the Long Range Transportation Plan for the Genesee Finger Lakes Region 2045, amending the National Performance Measures Report for the Genesee Finger Lakes Region, adopting the Transportation Conformity Statement for the Long Range Transportation Plan for the Genesee Finger Lakes Region 2045 and the 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program, and support the Wyoming County requested functional classification system reclassification. Additionally, the Planning Committee took the following tasks. We approved the scopes of services for 3 UPWP tasks. They are the Victor Street Connectivity and Access Plan, the En route Charging Feasibility Study, and the City of Rochester Active Transportation Master Plan. And we approved 8 administrative modifications to the federal fiscal year 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program as requested by GTC staff, Ontario County, and the New York State Department of Transportation. And those modifications included changing the source of federal funds for the School Street Bridge over Salmon Creek, increasing the total cost of County Route 46 at Smith Road intersection improvements, deferring phases of the Route 33A over Erie Canal replacement, modifying phases of the Route 15A from I-90 to I-390 project, and deferring a phase of Route 414 over the CSX Bridge Rehabilitation Project, modifying phases of the Route 31 Monroe County line to the Village of Macedon project, deferring a phase of the Route 260 from Route 31 to Route 104 project, and increasing the total cost of Route 5 and US 20 intersection improvements project. We also approved 2 draft documents for public review, the Long Range Transportation Plan 2045 and the Transportation Conformity Determination for the Long Range Transportation Plan for the Genesee Finger Lakes Region 2045 and 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program. We were busy. Any questions?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Next on the agenda, we have, I'm sorry. Next on the agenda, we have the GTC staff report. If you would, please, Jim.
Sure, and I double checked that I am not muted. So, as I previously reported, every 4 years, GTC is subject to a FTA, FHWA joint certification review of our planning process to ensure that we were meeting the federal requirements. The Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration Federal Review Team conducted their virtual multi-day visit on March 9th, 10th, and 11th. The same platforms that we are using for this meeting supported the remote site visit, so we were able to make that happen without a face-to-face. As part of the process, the review team held individual conversations with Chairperson Lefebvre and Planning Committee Chairperson Scott Leathersich on March 8th. Additionally, there were 2 roundtable discussions on March 12th. The first was open to board and planning committee members and alternates. The second was open to various stakeholder groups we work with and the general public. On May 28th, the Federal Review Team provided me and NISDOT Statewide Planning Bureau a draft certification report for technical corrections. This means it's not about editorial and content, but if they cited something incorrectly or misunderstood particular facts and figures, we can send them feedback, and those responses are due by Monday, June 14th. The certification report identifies 1 corrective action, 12 recommendations, and 4 commendations. The corrective action is related to our Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, that covers the 9 counties, and the Metropolitan Planning Area that covers all of Monroe County and portions of Wayne, Ontario, and Livingston counties. This is depicted on our maps that we usually show you, the full 9 county area, and then the center part of the region highlighted as our MPA. I like to say we could think of the MPO as the people around the table and the decision makers, while the MPA can be thought of about the land, thought of as the land that we focus on our planning efforts. The Federal Review Team has instructed us to update our documentation such that that MPA boundary is expanded to cover the full 9 county area by March 31st. On Tuesday, I was able to discuss the draft report with the Statewide Planning Bureau. Our mutual concern is that there isn't any kind of assessment as to what the implications would be of growing that MPA boundary, changing it to cover the full 9 counties. What would that do to requirements of our planning process and the roles and responsibilities of GTC versus NISDOT or other member agencies? And also, we don't believe that the general definitions that they use to cite their request or their the required change supports the argument that they're making. There's a different portion of this federal regulation that's pertinent to MPA boundaries, and that sets minimum standards. It sets other allowable considerations, and we believe we are meeting that regulation as our existing MPA. So we're going to ask that they modify the corrective action to allow time to fully assess any implications of a boundary change and a desired path for our region, so that we present a plan for any change to our federal partners by March 31st, as opposed to go ahead and just change how you refer to it in your documents. Like I said, NISDOT Statewide Planning Bureau is we're of the same mind on this, so we'll be working towards that. With that, I'll answer any questions on our certification if I can. All right. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you're muted, but
No, I'm not muted.
Okay. I'm not hearing any questions, so.
We can, hearing no questions, we can move on to old business then.
Great. So federal legislation and funding, bit of a broken record. I mentioned the last meeting, Congress and the administration did come to agreement on all of the federal fiscal year 21 appropriation bills. They were signed into law on December 27th, and they fully fund the government operations through September 30th. It also, at that time, included supplemental funding for transportation. There was also a new package, the coronavirus relief, that provided additional funds for coronavirus relief. NISDOT is still working with the U.S. Department of Transportation on the guidance on utilizing these funds and the distribution. We had me and my fellow MPO directors had a meeting last week, and we had Dave Reddick, who heads up the capital program for NISDOT, assured us that we have time to utilize the funds. Initially, I was concerned that if we did not put those supplemental appropriations on the books by September 30th, that we'd lose the opportunity. But the way the law was written, we have, I believe it's 3 years to get those funds on the books. They'll still be available. So fortunately, even though we're running out of the federal fiscal year, we're not going to lose access to the funds that are designated for the urban area. Moving along to that, the Biden administration had been working with Congress to pass an infrastructure package as part of a larger economic support package. Unfortunately, talks between the White House and Republican negotiators appeared to have collapsed on Tuesday evening. I saw some things yesterday where there's some folks trying to get back together, some more moderates from both sides of the aisle trying to make something happen, but it's going to be a wait and see. But on a more positive note, Congress is making progress on a new multi-year surface transportation package that will succeed the FAST Act, which expires on September 30th. That was originally due to expire last year, September 30th, but prior to the election and with COVID and everything going on, Congress did extend the FAST Act for 1 year. On May 22nd, the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee released the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act of 2021. This committee has purview over the highway portion of the legislation, while the Banking Committee has purview over the public transportation portion. The highway portion, despite its name, also it covers roads, bridges, sidewalks, bicycle facilities. Essentially, if it's not public transportation, it falls under the highway side. This act authorizes $303.5 billion over 5 years. Markup of the bill was scheduled to begin in May 26th, and I've not seen a final bill passed. Senate's had a few other things on their mind. Highlights of at least the committee bill prior to markup, it establishes a new program to support electric vehicle charging infrastructure, establishes a program to support resiliency improvements, establishes a program to allow communities to study the impact of removing, retrofitting, or mitigating infrastructure that has disconnected traditionally Black or brown neighborhoods from the greater community. It establishes a pilot program that focuses on removing or retrofitting highways and other structures that create barriers within the communities, and establishes a rural surface transportation program. A couple of those highlights resonate. Right now, the city of Rochester is looking at the Inner Loop North and what options are for the future of that. So this potentially provides some funding to keep moving forward with that. And if it's determined that a new facility is needed, then perhaps there's some funding to take care of that as well. On the House side, on June 4th, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee released the Investing in a New Vision for the Environment and Surface Transportation, or INVEST in America Act. The markup of the bill began yesterday, and we have to wait and see what comes out of that process. The House Appropriations Committee will need to develop the legislation that pays for the package. Prior to the markup, the INVEST Act of 2021 authorizes $547 billion over 5 years, compared to the $305.5 billion that was over 5 years in the current FAST Act. So a significant increase there. Highlights of this include authorizing $343 billion on the highway side, $109 billion on the transit side, establishes a new carbon pollution reduction program, establishes a pre-disaster mitigation program to support resiliency improvements. So it sounds like the Senate and the House are of similar minds on those efforts. It also establishes a $250 million per year program for metropolitan areas to carry out projects. The way I'm understanding this would be where the Senate had a package that or a program that had to be spent in rural areas. This is a program that has to be spent in metropolitan or urban areas. It would establish a new program to support support planning and capital construction grants that are focused on remediating economically disadvantaged and underserved communities. It sets aside $4 billion for bridges on the national highway system. And then similarly, or related to bridges, it would require states to obligate no less than 20% of two major funding categories, the National Highway Performance Program and the Surface Transportation Block Route Programs. Again, 20% of that would have to go towards bridge rehabilitation and or bridge replacement projects. Establishes a new program to support electrical vehicle charging, but also hydrogen fueling infrastructure, where the Senate just had electrical vehicle, the House has electrical vehicle and hydrogen. Provides support for connected active transportation networks, filling in the blanks and growing those networks. And then also identifies discretionary member designated projects, or what we have referred to as earmarks in the past. So earmarks are back. Since there are differences between the Senate and the House bills, a conference committee will be needed to resolve those. And then on the following sides, we've listed the earmarks by congressional districts, what we were successful in receiving. And then I'm pleased to see that two of the projects, the Elmwood Ave multi-use corridor improvement project and the Victor transportation mitigation implement significant recommendations out of past UPWP studies. And these earmarks are for $8.6 million and $9.9 million respectively. And these are the two largest earmarks in the region. So hopefully they'll survive the conference bill process. And it's gratifying to see our planning efforts resulting in projects that can benefit the community, and I think help position both those, both the town of Victor, the village of Victor, and the town of Brighton and Monroe County to pursue those earmarks with something to back them up. That is my report on that. I can try to answer any questions.
Sounds good, Jim. Hearing no questions, we can move into the TIP staff modifications, which are included in our meeting packets.
Yeah, we have just the two, and our deal is we have to let you folks know when we have these staff changes. So happy to answer questions if there are any on these two projects.
Sounds like there's no questions. We have several action items to consider this morning. First will be the UPWP closeouts, and I'll ask if there's any objection by a board member or an alternate to, combine these items under one resolution. Hearing no objection, I'll ask for a motion and a second, please.
Motion, Stein, GENESEE.
Jim Pop, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Jim, would you please provide an overview?
Sure.
And discussion?
So proposed resolutions 2115 and 21-17 through 21-22, 21 were recommended, reviewed and recommended for your approval by the planning committee on April 8th, while resolution 21-16 and 21-22 were reviewed and recommended for your approval by the planning committee at its May 13th meeting. Starting with the Wayne County High Accident Locations Program, Wayne County conducted this study after analyzing all county road intersections. The 15 intersections were analyzed to identify patterns of safety deficiencies and effective countermeasures. The report, it provides the county with suggestions for each location, suggested improvements for each location rather. Only one intersection has the potential for capital projects. The others are more along the lines of maintenance projects, relatively low cost that could be implemented by county staff. The Livingston County Downtown Wayfinding Master Plan was conducted by Livingston County. The goals were to improve navigation throughout the county, support economic development within the county's downtowns, visually connect downtowns and destinations through uniform and consistent signage, and promoting the county's unique assets and destinations. The design and implementation of a wayfinding system will weave together the 9 villages of Avon, Caledonia, Dansville, Geneseo, Leicester, Lima, Livonia, Mount Morris, and Nunde through a cohesive vehicular and pedestrian signage system. Next, we have the Route 390 multi-use trail. The town of Greece conducted this study. This trail is one of the oldest in the region and does not meet current standards. The key findings indicate that the trail requires a major end-of-life rehabilitation, and this study provides support as the town pursues various funding opportunities. The Mount Morris to Leicester Route 36 corridor study was a joint effort among the towns and villages of Mount Morris and Leicester. Since the project involved state routes and a major access point to Letchworth State Park, NISDOT and state parks were key participants. The study identified potential safety, mobility, and accessibility improvements. The O'Rourke Bridge operations and maintenance analysis was a study conducted by NISDOT. The O'Rourke Bridge has a unique design within our region, which is also rare within the state. Due to this uniqueness, a custom strategy was needed. A set of recommendations was identified, including mechanical and electrical repairs, updates to maintenance and operations literature, personnel training, and capital repairs. An asset management schedule with estimated costs was also developed. The final report will serve as a guide for NISDOT and Monroe County in making decisions about future investments in the bridge. This is a unique situation where the state DOT owns the bridge, but Monroe County DOT operates it, so they were involved in this project in partnership. The Gananda Parkway Pedestrian Bicycle Active Transportation Plan was conducted by Wayne County. Gananda Parkway serves like a spine through this community. While it serves motor vehicles well, it does not do the same for bicyclists and pedestrians. The recommendations identify the opportunities for coordinated and cohesive land use, street design, regulatory policies, and strategies to support current and anticipated future community needs. The Middle Cheshire Road and Healthcare Services Corridor Active Transportation Plan was conducted by the town of Canandaigua. A previous study of County Road 16 conducted by the County Highway Department looked at trying to fit pedestrian and bicycles facilities along the western shore of Canandaigua Lake. Since that road could not safely accommodate the new bicycle facilities, it was recommended that nearby Middle Cheshire Road be studied for potential to safely do so. The area around F.F. Thompson Hospital provides many medical services and is a natural extension of any kind of bicycle or pedestrian facilities. So included among the recommendations are intersection improvements, placemaking concepts for the corridor, and an implementation plan. The Lake Ontario State Parkway Lane Reduction Facility study was conducted by Orleans County. The purpose of the study was to determine the feasibility of repurposing the eastbound or westbound lanes of approximately 12.7 miles of Lake Ontario State Parkway. This would be the western end. The feasibility of repurposing the roadway to reduce long-term maintenance costs while continuing to address vehicle demand along the corridor was investigated. Public feedback was sought regarding the future of the parkway. 4 concepts were developed considering both the public feedback and the steering committee input. The alternative concepts were to retain the existing Lake Ontario State Parkway, to develop an alternative that would provide access to Lakeside Beach State Park along Route 18 and would sever the connection of the Route 98 bridge over Oak Orchard Creek. Another concept was to modify the Lake Ontario State Parkway such that it was just one lane in each direction west of Route 98. Again, the bridge over Oak Orchard Creek, take one of those bridges out and put two-way traffic on the other. And the last concept was converting the Lake Ontario State Parkway to a 2-lane parkway throughout and utilizing the current eastbound lanes to accommodate the two-way traffic and basically remove the westbound lanes and open up for opportunities for various community amenities. A preferred alternative was not identified as there was a lack of consensus on the steering committee. The alternatives would need to be further analyzed as part of a project development if a capital project is pursued. There was, like I said, no clear-cut consensus even among the public. So it was one of those things that we can identify. Here's what to continue to look for. With that, I will answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Jim. Is there any discussion before we consider this action? Hearing none, I'd ask anyone opposed to please state that. Hearing no one opposed, I'll consider this action carried and passed. Next, ask for a motion and a second to move to the floor, amending the 2021-2022 Unified Plan Work Program.
I'll make that motion, Ken Miller.
Scott Leathers, second.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask Jim to please give an explanation of the action.
Great, thank you. First, I just want to make a correction on the agenda. It should be Resolution 21-22. But this resolution was reviewed and recommended for your approval by the Planning Committee at this May 13th meeting. This is a function we do every year due to timing of the UPWP. The adopted 21-22 UPWP includes an estimated rollover of amounts for several projects that were not expected to be completed by March 31st. These estimated rollovers are based on actual expenses through the second quarter. Again, given the timing of document development, we did not have the third quarter completed. Now that the accounting for the fiscal year has been closed out, the budgets for these projects can be adjusted to reflect the actual rollover amounts, showing the expenditures through the third and fourth quarter. Individual projects for which adjustments between the estimated and actual rollover amounts required are presented in Exhibit 1, table that was attached to the memo. And due to COVID impacting staff activity, there was actually considerable savings from our core budget relative to typical years. So we have the opportunity to utilize these savings by programming them immediately. As part of this, GTC staff proposed and the Planning Committee concurred to create a new healthcare contingency, or Task 1610. This would provide budgetary capacity for extraordinary healthcare expenses. As the host agency for GTC, RGRTA includes GTC staff and its group health insurance. This insurance plan includes a self-funded component with stop-loss protection. The GTC core budget covers our ordinary healthcare expenses for our staff. However, in the event of an extraordinary healthcare expense, such as an ICU care, GTC is forced to reallocate funds from within our planned expenses. Unfortunately, this has happened to 2 different staff members in the last few years. So we want to create this contingency in the event that someone covered under our health insurance encounters a extraordinary healthcare expense. This task would be used so there's no impact on planned expenses. The task will be funded each year, and once a fiscal year has been completed, any unused funds would become available for future use. And as I noted in the memo, the way this would work is we encounter such a situation, I would reach out to the RGRTA finance folks, and either the chief financial officer or the manager of accounting would have to agree that the expenses are extraordinary and allow us to tap this contingency. Basically, we would just do accounting changes to access the funds and not impact the budget. But that gives us a backstop to make sure that there's in essence an independent voice to agree that this is extraordinary. Even with creating this healthcare contingency, there was still more than $86,000 available from our savings. So GTC staff reviewed the UPWP applications that were not funded in the last cycle due to a lack of available funds. And the planning committee sought input from the UPWP Development Committee, or UDC. The UDC recommended funding the town of Webster's proposal for the West Webster Hamlet Revitalization Plan. The UDC noted the equity aspects of the study area and the town's efforts to engage the community, even though it was not funded, even though they were not successful in their UPWP application, they still kept momentum going. Other than that, it's a routine budget reconciliation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jim, the stop loss that our GRTA has, do you know, is it specific or aggregate as far as the healthcare plan is concerned?
My understanding is, I guess it would be, well, I guess, I'm sorry, specific or aggregate in the case. My understanding is once the expenses hit 250,000, then the insurance picks up. So it's sort of like almost a high deductible for the agency as well. But GTC staff budget is completely self-contained. So any expenses for our staff have to come out of our budget.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Is there any further discussion on this action item? Hearing none, I'd ask if there's anyone opposed to this this amending of the Unified Plan Work Program. Hearing none, this action item is carried. Next, we'll consider the TIP amendments, and I'll ask if there's any member or alternate who would like to have any of these a separate vote. Hearing that, there was no objections. We'll consider all these under one individual resolution. And I would ask for a motion and a second on this, please.
Carpenter, so moved.
Second.
McIntosh.
Oh, whoever. Jim, you got it.
Oh,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jim, if you would, please provide an overview.
Sorry about that. I muted myself. The items 1 through 12 are transit projects that realign the TIP with the RGRTA program of projects. That's an exercise they have to go through every year to look at their needs for the following year, and then has its own separate public input component. So typically this time of year, we're looking to just reorganize the funding. It's all self-contained, the offsets, and this funding is only available to RGRTA. Alex, if you can advance through the individual ones, that might help. Items 13 and 14 are these are funds out of our planning target, which are our regional available funds. Project sponsors, as they went through their project development process, identified these needs. Just want to see. So I'm sorry, my screen was not lining up. Okay, so the number 10, resolution 21-33, basically takes 2 preventive maintenance projects and combines them under a single contract for efficiencies of traffic control, mobilization, and hopefully some savings by having a larger project. The 21-34, changing the limits of the bridge steel repairs of 40 locations. Basically, some of the locations have already been addressed by NISDOT, and other locations have been identified as needing steel repairs. So the specific locations are changing and the number of locations would change, but the accomplishment in cost is very similar. Items 12 through, let's see, 22. So these are preventive maintenance projects. And you may recall when we adopted the TIP in 2019, we had a preventive maintenance reserve block set aside for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. And that was a recognition that asking project sponsors in 2018 what their project needs were going to be from preventive maintenance perspective in 5 to 6 years later, really wasn't feasible. So we set aside funding blocks. In the past few months, we've worked with the State Department of Transportation and the county highway departments and identified specific locations to utilize that set aside of funds for preventive maintenance. So what these changes do is zero out the block of funds that were set aside and identify specific locations to conduct the preventive maintenance activities. The last two projects were we were fortunate enough to get some statewide funding, that's additional funds to the region. The North Grease Road intersection safety improvements is some additional safety funds coming from Albany, and the Route 390 pavement rehabilitation project is some additional funds under the National Highway Performance Program, again, coming out of the statewide pot. With that, if there's any questions, I might have to defer to Alex or Chris, but we'll answer whatever you got.
Thanks, Jim. I'll ask again, is there any discussion before we consider these TIP amendments? Hearing none, I'll ask if there's anyone opposed to the passage of these amendments. Hearing no opposition, we'll consider these amendments passed. Next, I'll ask for a motion and a second for Jim to discuss the long-range transportation plan for our region.
So moved, Jay.
Chris Reeves, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Jim, would you please provide an overview of our long-range plan?
Sure. This is something we do periodically. It sets a tone, but Jody Binnix has really been the lead for this project and is really best positioned to talk about all the aspects. So Jody's going to present on this. I'll talk about a couple things and then we'll come back to for questions at the end. And since this is the most important, one of the most important things we do, this will be a little bit more in-depth presentation than the other items.
Thanks, Jim. Alex, you can advance the slide. So what is the long-range plan, or the LRTP, and why is it important? The LRTP provides the strategic direction for more detailed planning and implementation of transportation projects over the next 25 years. The LRTP guides decision-making through the concept-level planning in the UPWP and investment decision-making in the TIP. Personally, I always tell people that the LRTP is I think of it as the umbrella that covers the entire organization. Every decision that GTC makes has to follow the framework that's set forth in the LRTP. Next slide, Alex. So how was the LRTP developed? The development cycle began in the spring of 2020. It started with an assessment of the existing conditions of the transportation system and regional demographic and socioeconomic characteristics. That was followed closely by the identification of emerging issues and opportunities facing the region now and over the next 25 years. This also coincided with the first round of public involvement. Staff developed a survey gauging public opinion ranging or related to transportation issues and opportunities and impacts from the pandemic that were happening at the time. We also conducted 2 virtual open houses. So using what we heard from the public and our internal review of completed UPWP studies and the data that we crunched down, we developed a list of current and future needs. This transportation needs assessment then fed directly into the recommendation development. From there, the financial plan, or how we're going to pay for all our recommendations, was created, and another round of public involvement was conducted just for the recommendations. So we did hold 2 virtual open houses during this time as well. So taking the input that we got from the public, we finalized the recommendations, and we did make quite a few edits to them based on feedback that we received. Then we released the draft plan for a formal 30-day review. The entire plan was out. We did receive some comments on that as well. So after receiving feedback on the plan, we finalized the content, and staff conducted just a kind of QA/QC review of the plan. And now it's coming before you today. Next slide, Alex. So the LRTP, the planning process for it really kicked off at the start of the pandemic, which was challenging. Prior to the pandemic, we were really prepared to go directly out to the public at farmers markets, community events, and hold open houses. We did this in the past. It had worked out really well. Due to the public health guidelines instituted due to the pandemic, we were required to really pivot our approach to public involvement. So we did a completely virtual involvement process. We had access to the publicinput.com platform. So that was utilized as the engagement hub for all things LRTP related. Even though the public involvement was virtual, we really made efforts to keep the process as inclusive as possible by offering a variety of methods. Through the publicinput.com platform, a dedicated phone line was made available, along with the ability to send text messages, email. Folks were still able to send comments via the mail. They also got a hold of me directly. We did set up some one-on-one meetings with folks, and these notices were advertised on Facebook, Twitter, through email, and legal notices in the newspaper. Okay, next slide, Alex. So the next few slides really capture the high-level components of the plan. The plan, it's pretty long. It's about 100 pages. I can't cover everything, but I'm going to try to hit the highlights. So for the emerging issues and opportunities, we included the following. Transportation and public health, impacts of extreme weather and climate change, and the expansion of our alternative fuels. These 3 were identified in previous long-range plans, but are still relevant today. We also identified a set of new emerging issues and opportunities. Unforeseen system disruptions, which was a nod to the pandemic. We just saw how quickly everything as we knew it could change. Strategic divestment. This is a strategy that staff have been pursuing internally over the past few years, and now we're really formalizing that with the new plan. Emerging technologies really warranted its own section. So under there, we have mobility as a service, connected, autonomous, and automated vehicles, and e-commerce. Next slide, Alex. So as I mentioned before, the transportation system needs were developed collaboratively among staff using feedback from the first round of public involvement, recommendations from previous UPWP studies, discussions with our member agencies, the results from that data analysis, and we also looked to areas of emphasis that were in the federal transportation legislation. The transportation system needs are as follows: ensuring equity throughout the transportation system. This came up frequently during the public review process. Increasing safety for all users, maintaining the existing system in a state of good repair, ensuring access to all for employment goods and services. This is especially a concern in our rural communities. Addressing mobility needs of an aging population. Just like the rest of the country, our population is aging. Okay, next slide, Alex. Expanding mobility and connectivity for active transportation users, providing more options to bike and just walk around our communities is very important to the public. Reducing energy uses and greenhouse gas emissions, improving coordination of transportation services, enhancing connectivity and access for freight, increasing the system resiliency, and supporting leisure, travel, and tourism. Okay, next slide. So the next few slides discuss the recommendations, which is really kind of the crux of the plan. So as reported at the February board meeting, Building off the work that had been completed to date, staff developed the recommendations. So in total, there are 78, and they're grouped into 5 main categories: health and safety, access and equity, system management and maintenance, sustainability and resilience, and economic development. These 5 recommendations categories tie directly back to the goals and objectives of the plan. They also cover the 10 planning factors that are outlined in the FAST Act, which is our current federal transportation legislation. Okay, next slide, Alex. So staff really made a concerted effort to standardize the presentation of the recommendations. Our goal was for the recommendations to be easily understood by both the public and policymakers, and to be easily referenced when needed. GTC gets a lot of requests for funding to support different projects, and it's really important that we can look back to the plan and have the plan support those requests. So this is an example of the economic development recommendations. Each recommendation has a similar framework. We have a brief name with an identifier that corresponds to that one of those 5 categories. In this case, it's ED for economic development, description or the how, the importance or the why are we going to do this, potential partners for implementation, and the time frame. So I will say that the numbering system does not indicate priority at all. The recommendations are really organized by time frame. In years past, GTC's LRTP has been a policy-based plan, and that's continued. This LRTP is not recommending specific transportation projects per se. Next slide, Alex. So within the recommendations chapter, there are project spotlights that show how these policy-based recommendations will support the actual projects. In this case, we have a UPWP study that's highlighted. In other instances, the project spotlights highlight a member agency activity or state-driven projects, such as the stamp site, different economic development projects going on in the region. As shown on this slide, regarding the economic development recommendations, we're highlighting Ontario County's Freight Corridor Development Plan. Since completion, this project has successfully led to additional funding being secured to conduct a buildings conditions assessment report for the Lehigh Valley Roundhouse for future uses. Currently, there's a local trucking company that's developing a cold storage facility, and they're looking to enable rail access to that facility through the site plan review process at the county. This project supports several of these economic development recommendations in the plan, such as rail-enabled business, rail infrastructure, and regional destination promotion. And again, this is just an example. And the next slide, Alex. So we have all these recommendations, so how are we going to measure our progress? So the Evaluating Progress chapter outlines the performance measures that are just unique to the long-range plan, to this plan. These performance measures are a combination of past measures that we've set forth in previous LRTPs, as well as new measures that really reflect this plan's recommendations. The performance measures chapter, these performance measures are independent from the national performance measures that are authorized by the FAST Act. I'll talk about that in a little bit more greater detail. As you can see at the example on your screen, the measures correspond, again, back to those 5 recommendations categories. We have the measure, a benchmark, and the year that the data is from, along with a likely target, which we kept very simple, just a decrease, increase, or no change. So next slide. So as I mentioned before, the FAST Act requires MPOs to establish performance targets that address the national performance measures. So to date, GTC has supported the NISDA and RGRTA targets as opposed to setting our regional targets. The national performance measures and the agreed upon targets are presented in a standalone national performance measures report. So with the adoption of the new long-range plan, we have a couple more federal regulations we have to meet regarding the national performance measures. The first requires the LRTP to include descriptions of progress in regards to meeting the performance targets. And the next requires that the LRTP include a system performance report that describes the condition and performance of the transportation system with respect to the national performance targets. So in order to meet this reporting requirement, the standalone National Performance Measures Report is incorporated into the LRTP by reference. And this will allow GTC to quickly respond to changes in the performance targets that are established by our member agencies without having to amend the LRTP in the interim years. Next slide, Alex. And the next few slides discuss the financial plan, and that was really Alex and Jim's role with the plan development. So I'm going to turn it back over to them to kind of wrap up the financial plan discussion.
All right, so I'll jump into this, and if we got to get into the weeds, that'll be Alex. But one of the requirements of a long range plan is that it be fiscally constrained, or that we're not identifying more than we can afford to pay for with reasonably assumed revenues. You can't, we can't say, oh, we're gonna toll every road. That's not reasonable. So we developed some projected revenues based on the assumption that the next federal transportation bill will have similar levels to the FAST Act. That my thinking is it's always easier to start with a smaller number and add opportunities if a larger revenue comes through, but we don't want to start shortchanged. And the average compound annual growth that we have over the 25 years is about 1%. So we expect some escalation, but we're not being unreasonable and saying, oh, we're going to get 10% growth year over year. And we've also increased the detail of state and local revenues, utilizing CIPs, so various other revenue programs and projects, the budgets. Counties have access to what's called CHIPS funding, county highway funds from the state. But one of the recommendations from our last certification process was to create a more robust financial plan, look to better document our non-federal revenues, and we've done that. Alex, if you can advance the slide. So the financial plan, we start with our revenues and we end up with investment strategies. As Jody mentioned, it's a policy-based program rather than identifying specific projects. We don't know the locations that are going to need pavement rehabilitation in 10 years or pavement reconstruction. So we're developing categories. In our region, we're not looking to build new highways, major new facilities. So this is an appropriate way to go. And the existing and emerging projects that come out fall into 18 programmatic categories. These strategies are constrained by the available funds through 2045. So we'll say, a certain amount of investment going to safety or to bicycle facilities or to bridge facilities. And this would provide guidance for how we fund TIP projects in the future each year, trying to, we're going to take what we get for applications each cycle and then try to prioritize the funding in such a way that we advance our long range plan. And there are a few regionally significant projects that we've shown in our illustrative project list. Illustrative means it's not paid for at this time, but should funding come through, we're able to easily move it in. But it anticipates, or should say it recognizes that even though it's not getting federal funds, it is still significant to the region. So next slide, please. This is a diagram that does a lot. This is the first time we're using, for those that aren't familiar, it's called the sand key diagram. And really what we're able to show is the flows. Starting on the left, we have our revenue source. We have federal revenues, we have state revenues, we have local revenues. But then you'll see the color bands start to split. And we go into what call our modal administration. So Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration. So the top portion of the chart, the blue streaks, are following the highway path. And the sort of pink salmon color streaks are following the transit program. And you'll see, for example, if you look at the federal, big portion staying blue and a chunk going salmon. The same thing with the state, where a bigger portion sticking to transit, and then the local. So as you follow those flows, from the modal administration continuing to the right, now you'll see various funding programs, our National Highway Performance Program, safety funds, transit funds, off-system brakes. So whatever the funding category, funding program is then broken out. And then those funding categories will go to those 18 investment strategies I refer to, and whether that be developing new bicycle and pedestrian facilities, addressing safety needs, repairing bridges, repairing roads, replacing buses, supporting alternative fuel infrastructures. Those are the various investment strategies that show up there. And what we've done is we've tried to convey an awful lot of information in this. I'll use the engineering phrase of elegant, the graphic that takes a lot of information and tries to follow it. But we also recognize that this could be a challenge. So within, we'll have an appendix that details the financial breakdown in tabular format for anybody that wants to look at the numbers, as opposed to this one that gives you a general sense of, the wider the band, the more we're spending on that particular strategy. Next slide, please. So I think we're back to Jody.
Yep. So in summary, the LRTP is comprised of a couple components. The plan itself, along with two appendices. Appendix A is a comprehensive summary of all the public comments we received from all 3 rounds of our public engagement processes. Appendix B, as Jim just discussed, is the financial plans kind of breakdown into tabular format. And the National Performance Measures Report is a companion document that's going to be continuously amended with the latest performance targets. We're currently on a 5-year update cycle, and the next LRTP is due in 2026. And if you have any questions on the long-range planning process or the plan itself, I'd be happy to take them.
Well, thanks, Jim and Jody. I'd just like to say thank you to the staff for all the hard work and effort that was put into this, and just, hopefully, I know it's a real good plan to chart our future here in the region. I'll ask, is there any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, is there anyone opposed to adopting this as our long-range plan? Hearing none, this will be, it is adopted by the GTC as our long-range plan for our region. Next, I'd ask for a motion and a second to, we have to amend the National Performance Measures Report.
So moved, Jay.
Second, Jim Pond.
Thank you. Jim, would you provide us overview on this item, please?
Oh, Jim, you're muted again.
Yes, but before I do want to, I was remiss, and Mr. Lefebvre, you reminded me, I should have done a greater acknowledgement for our staff. They worked very hard on this, the long range plan, and you'll see the look and feel. It takes it to another level. Bob Williams on our staff worked on the graphic design component of it. The financial plan is much more in depth than we've ever had in our long range plan, and Alex was instrumental to that. Jody quarterbacked the entire effort. Lori quarterbacked the public engagement. Chris did a lot of the data analysis and all the mapping, but also a lot of quality control. One of the things that we made a concerted effort was to make that document readable and digestible by the general public. And we even heard that in some of the comments that, hey, this was relatively easy to read. Chris was instrumental to that. Joe, a lot of the editorial stuff, but heavily involved in the performance measures with Jody and making sure that was working through, in addition to all the technology, the ITS type stuff. And then, Eileen keeping everything in check and even reviewing some of the stuff as we went along. Again, a total staff effort, and it's the quality of the plan is a credit to them. And then, oh, Jody just reminded me, Bob did worked on a mapping as well. So, so it looks like Bob did most of the mapping, and Chris worked on the data analysis and quality control and reviewing materials. Thank you for that clarification, Jody. Moving on to the National Performance Measures Report. This, as Jody said, we're required with the long range plan adoption to include the performance measures that we have to add our ongoing progress, and we have to demonstrate how the performance measures align with the 2045 LRTP. We have, for the past several years, had a standalone document. As Jody mentioned, we have performance measures that are related to safety that are set by the state, pavement conditions that are set by the state. We have transit performance measures that are set by RGRTA. And this board has pretty consistently said, we want to program projects towards the performance targets of our member agencies, and we're not going to do separate measures just to this region. Having the standalone report allows us to make changes when they come due, as Jody said, without reopening the long range plan and doing another 30-day review. This is I don't want to call it a compliance document. It's a little bit more than that, but it's something that we do to demonstrate that we are addressing the performance measures that are spelled out in federal regulations that every metropolitan area has to look at. Next slide, please, Alex. The performance measure report, the changes we have on this, we are updating the baseline data for the transit assets. The RGRTA has submitted some new data to the National Transit Database, and NISDOT has developed its mid-performance period progress report. When the measures were first created, they had to have there 2 years and 4 years, and then after 2 years, they had to do a progress report. So their most recent report updated baseline information for pavement, for bridge, and for system performance. So this new standalone document reflects those updated baseline figures. Next slide. So with that, we're asking to adopt this as a standalone report that is a companion to the long range plan. And any questions, I'll likely need to defer to Jody or Alex.
Oh, thanks, Jim. If there's no further discussion, I'd ask if anyone is opposed to this amending of our performance measures. Hearing none, the action is carried. Next, I'll ask for a motion in a second so we can look at adopting our transportation conformity statement for the long range plan.
Bill Carpenter, so moved.
Inglesby, second.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jim, if you would, please.
Sure. The conformity statement is related to air quality, and as Jody noted, adopting a new long-range transportation plan triggers the need for a new conformity determination. This is essentially a compliance document. The conformity statement demonstrates that the long-range transportation plan and the transportation improvement program meet federal transportation conformity requirements. Ultimately, the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration make that conformity determination based on the review of the statement we submit to them. And we fall into a situation due to a lawsuit from Southern California whereby we meet the most recent air quality standards, but the measures from 1997. At that time, we didn't meet those standards. So we are what's called an orphan area. I think there was about 10 to 15, maybe that many in the whole country, and New York State has 6 of these. So a really interesting phenomenon. But as an orphan area, we have certain things we need to include. We must document our latest planning assumptions, transportation control measures. In our case, they're not applicable. We don't have any for our region. What the report, which if we had them, we would have to document what they are and how we're meeting them. We had to show interagency consultation group, and there is the New York State Air Quality Interagency Consultation Group. That is New York State Department of Transportation, Department of Environmental Conservation, the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, and the U.S. EPA, along with the various MPOs across the state. We did have consultation with them on our projects. We have to demonstrate fiscal constraint. We talked about that with the financial chapter of the long range plan. And every time we do TIP amendments, we have an updated fiscal constraint table that basically documents what our reasonably expected revenues are and what our expenditures will be. And then there is a requirement to get a classification with regard to project status. Various projects would be exempt from air quality analysis if we were required to do an emissions analysis or go against a mission budget. And that is done through the Air Quality Interagency Consultation Group, where we submit to them what we think the classification should be and what our justification for that is. And then they have to concur. And it's things like a safety project, or you're just repaving a road without any major widening. You're rehabilitating a bridge without adding lanes. Pretty innocuous stuff when it comes to air quality. Those are exempt. And then the conformity statement also, we have to identify any regionally significant projects. So as was mentioned earlier, a 30-day public review was held in conjunction with the long-range transportation plan. Not surprisingly, there were no comments submitted. The next slide shows the changing air quality standard since 2005, and the red line that has taken sort of the stair-step approach. The blue and yellow lines are showing a running 3-year average at 2 different air quality stations. One is in Williamson, one is in Rochester. But what it shows is since 2009, our region has been consistently under the air quality standard and meeting those standards. So we are in good shape with that. I think that's the last slide, right, Alex?
Yes, it is.
All right. So with that, open to any questions you might have, and for some of the details, I may need to defer to Alex.
Thanks, Jim. If there's no other further discussion, I'll ask if anyone is opposed to adopting this conformity statement. Hearing no objections, I'll consider this action item passed. Next, I'll ask for a motion and a second to consider the Wyoming County requested functional classification system reclassification.
I'll move, Jim Pond.
Al Leatherstead, second.
Thanks for the motion and the second. Jim, if you would please, an overview.
Sure. This is going to look familiar to the folks that were at our meeting in February. And just as a reminder, the functional classification system is a hierarchy of the road network that balances mobility, or how far you can go, with accessibility. What level can you access? The extremes are an interstate highway, expressway that you can get on and off only in certain locations, so it's limited accessibility, but it takes you pretty far, so it has high mobility. The other end would be, a cul-de-sac in a subdivision. It doesn't take you very far, low mobility, but it accesses every property, so high accessibility. Back in February, we discussed the request from Wyoming County to extend the classification of along Exchange Street, or Route 31, County Road 31, near the Attica Prison. The way it had previously been incorporated, the functional classification designation stopped at the urban area boundary based on the census information, and it was 0.15 miles short of Dunbar Road. And it made sense to extend that to the intersection to have a logical terminus, and also allowed for federal funds on a road project that the county was pursuing. When we submitted the request to NISDOT main office and their data services bureau, and they worked on coding the information in their database, they looked at it and said, well, we have just to the west Route 98 on the functional classification system, and rather than terminating at a T intersection of a local road, we'd like you to consider taking that functional classification and heading west. Alex, I don't know if you know the distance, but maybe it's a half mile, just to tie into another rural major collector. So the request today is to bump Dunbar Road from a local road to a rural major collector, and to create that tie-in as shown on the graphic on your screen right now. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thanks, Jim. Is there any further discussion on this? Hearing none, I'll ask if there's any objections to supporting this Wyoming County request. Hearing no objections, we'll consider this action passed. Next on the agenda, I'll ask if there's any new business to be considered this morning. Hearing no new business, our next meeting is scheduled for August 26th, and possibly, hopefully, we can be in person at the Henrietta Town Hall. I'll ask if there's no other business to come before the board this morning, I'd ask for a motion and a second for adjournment.
Santos moves, we adjourn.
McIntosh seconds.
Thank you. If there's no objections, we'll consider the meeting stand adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Please stay safe.
Yep, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Good to see everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.